Hey guys, welcome to the introduction to photography video. This is just kind of a supplemental video to add some thoughts and ideas to what you've been doing in your reading, okay? So photography is something we all do. Many people nowadays have a smartphone that they carry around and they take photos with wherever they are, right? Especially of like their kids or their cats and dogs. I don't have a cat and dog, but I do have boys, so that makes for fun times. Others of you might have a DSLR camera, right? One of these kind of cameras, whether Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, whoever, it doesn't matter. You can take good photos with either of these. DSLRs give you more options, okay, more control, but you can still take good photos if you understand what you're doing with just a simple smartphone. And as smartphones and cameras get better and better, people will take more and more photos with them, right? So there's three things that you want to be thinking about when you're taking a photo. That's composition, lighting, and focus, okay? So composition is all about creating an interesting looking photo, right? So like with design, you lay out elements to try to, when we're designing something, we're going to lay out the elements in a way that is visually appealing. With composition, you're going to compose a shot so that it looks visually easy. What I mean by composing, and what I want you to really make sure you're doing with whatever camera you're using, is that you're not going to just stand there, pull out your camera and go click. You're going to sit here and you're going to think and purposefully think, okay, well, how does this look? Okay, what if I move my camera a little higher? What if I move it down, point it up of an angle, kind of maybe point up the camera, take an angle from down, stuff like that. So you're going to be thinking about what you're doing and you're moving yourself around because you can't move a lot of objects with photography. Like, yes, you can maybe move a person or you can move a chair, but you can't move the mountain. You can't move a tree. You can't move the darn telephone pole that's sticking out of somebody's head. So you might have to move as the photographer. You might have to move that camera around to compose the shot. So let me just give you some things to be thinking about when you're composing. Rule of thirds is one of the biggest ones, and that is it's kind of based off of the Golden ratio concept in design, but it's basically there are those thirds in your design, and where a third intersects is an area of visual interest. A good place to put your focal point, the thing that you want to stand out or pop out in your design. It also just often looks a lot better in a design to have something kind of off to a side than just centered. Centered, again, is like centering text. There's a time to do it, but often if you just do it because you're being lazy, it doesn't look good, right? You want to be purposeful. So rule of thirds, okay? Another one is your viewpoint or perspective, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, but think about the angle you're taking a photo from. Often eye level, or kind of the eye level of a person, or kind of like the same level at where an object is at, is a very good looking angle. So like for children, a lot of parents will take out their phone and they'll be taking a picture of their child like this. And little Timmy here doesn't look as nice from this angle as if the parent was to bend down and take the photo at eye level. So you want to be willing to move around, whether it's doing that or maybe you want to get below an object for some reason. You got to be careful though, because that's another problem, is taking a picture below, you might get this kind of look where you can see up through their nose. Not the most appealing look, right? So you got to kind of think about that and be careful, but try different angles, move around, experiment. One of the problems people get is they'll go take a picture of, something cool, like I don't know, say a beautiful mountain landscape that everybody comes to visit. There's the Tetons, right? Grand Teton area. But like people go to take those photos, and what happens is everybody's photo looks the same. So be willing to experiment. Be willing to say, okay, everybody's standing right here. Well, what if I move over here to this area? Or what if I get really low, or I get kind of high up on this? And try different angles. Try and experiment. It's a digital camera. You have an endless amount of film pretty much if you're willing to delete the bad stuff. So you can try a lot of different things until you get something that looks good. That's one of the benefits for digital film. You have almost an endless amount of film. So another one is background. So be careful with what's in the background. Pay attention to that. Again, like I said before, you don't want to have that person who's got a telephone pole or tree or something sticking out from behind their head. Pay attention to that. Make sure that doesn't happen. Also contrast. Make sure you contrast objects with like value. So you want to have, like, if your person's really light, then if the background's dark, it will help your subject pop out and look better. Or if your background is blurry and your person is in the foreground is in focus. So think about that and contrast things in the background with things in the foreground. Whether your person's in the background, your subject that's in focus, you want to be the focal point is in the background or in the foreground. Contrast those two things. Okay, filling the frame. One of the problems people often do is they don't get close enough to make they just leave a bunch of empty, boring space. So get close. Move up close to an object and take the photo. Sometimes it's okay if you crop out parts of the object. You don't need to see the entire object sometimes for the image to look good. And when I say crop, I don't mean digitally afterwards. You can do that to fix a bad photo, but our goal is to take a good photo to begin with and then just make minor adjustments after if need be, right? So take your photo and move up close to the object. Instead of taking it way back and having a bunch of empty space, move on in close. There's one really famous head or portrait photographer that he always crops off the very top of the head, and I can't remember if he crops off like around the chin or if he crops up below, but I think it's below. But he moves up in close, and some people might not like having the top of the head cut off, but he does it because he's trying to capture the expression large in the frame and not have a bunch of just empty, boring white space because he uses a white background. So try getting up close, and sometimes getting those detailed shots can be really interesting and they give you a different viewpoint. Framing. So framing is just using real objects as frames or inside your photo, like a windowsill or, like the window of a car, or maybe like a branch of a tree or something like that. So that's a really cool idea for creating more interesting photos. And then another thing that people don't always think about is shooting through something. So like finding, you have your object you want to take over in the background. And so instead of just taking a picture of that object, maybe coming behind a tree or something that has like branches with leaves that you're shooting through. And so what happens with that, it creates really interesting focus because that stuff you're shooting through becomes blurry and the thing you're focusing on in the background is sharp. So that can create an interesting design. Now, again, symmetry is where you have things that are symmetrical, right? So like both sides are the same. So like my face, right? One eye, half a nostril, half of my mouth, right? Ear. So symmetry is fine and it can look really good if you're careful. You don't want to take a symmetrical photo that's the person's like off to the side or the object isn't centered. So you got to make sure you center that object perfectly. But symmetry can be interesting, but you got to make, it might mean you need something else going on. Like maybe you need to fill the frame, right? Having the person close up, the object close up, or having a really good contrasting background or something else to make it visually interesting. So symmetry can look good, or maybe you break the symmetry. You have something that's like symmetrical, say it's like a person, but then they have like an eye patch or something on one side. So it breaks the symmetry just a little bit, breaks that pattern a little bit, makes it more visually interesting. Okay, so those are some basic composition rules. There's more of them, of course, but those are some things you want to be thinking about as you take that photo, as you're composing the shot. Take time, stop, don't just take it instantly, unless it's your child who's looking cute because you only have 2 seconds. But stop if you can and think about it and be purposeful, right? Because photography is also, a type of design. And so design your photos by composing them. And then another 2 parts that go into that are lighting and focus. So lighting is just take time to know that you have good lighting. Lighting is central to photography. The original way photos were invented was somebody taking a plate, putting this chemical on it that then would melt and burn the plate, when light touched it, when it was exposed to light. And so that's how they originally took photos. They put this plate out there, lifted off the protective kind of cover, and what would happen is light would hit it, and those areas would get burned and or melted or whatever into the plate, making them brighter, and the other areas would stay wherever there's like a person them in the way of light hitting the plate, it would leave behind like a darker area. So that's kind of how photos started. I know it's a really brief explanation of that, but that's how it started. So light is basically what a camera is doing. A camera is grabbing light with these kind of cameras on the sensor. The sensor is picking up light, and that is, so the more light you have, the more, often the better your photo can be. Not if you have too much light, you don't want that, and that's overexposing. So that's where, and I'm probably guessing like on my forehead, you can kind of see it right now in this video, because I don't have a really good lighting setup with this, but it's where areas go to white, and you want to avoid that in your photo, as having areas go to complete white because they're overexposed. So like taking a picture where it's like noontime and the sun's hitting you directly, that's going to be overexposed. So unless you're going for a specific kind of look or effect, you want to avoid that. And so ways to do that is to take photos in the morning and the evening. There's this idea of the golden hour. People like to do that, or maybe when it's cloudy, because it kind of diffuses the light a little bit, so you can kind of play with that. Indoor lighting can be a problem because there's just not enough lighting, and so your photos look blurry, out of focus. What you can do is a window, like I have back here, you can go put the object you want to take a photo of right by that window. As long as the sun isn't directly outside of the window, the light will be naturally diffused and it'll look really good. The last thing again is focus. And so again, you want to you want to make sure the thing that you want to be, usually the focal point, you want that to be focused. You want it to be sharp. And so you want to play with, you want to make sure that you're avoiding it being too dark when you take the photo, so there's not enough light to really focus, or making sure you don't accidentally focus on something else. Like if you have an object close to you, that you don't focus on that instead of the thing that's important. And often creating an interesting photo, what you can do is put one object really far back and an object closer to the camera, and that will allow one of those two things to be in focus, and then the other one will not be in focus. And just learning your camera will help you. So you want to practice learning how to focus with your camera. Watch some tutorials on how to do that on YouTube. A smartphone, usually you just tap the thing on the screen that you want to be in focus, and that's how it does it. For my camera, I hold down the lens halfway, and it will focus on an object, usually whatever's in the middle of the frame, and then I can take I can recompose the shot, move the shot after I hold it down halfway and click and stuff like that. So I can't tell you every camera, but take some time and learn how to focus. So big thing is, if you take the time to compose your shots, make sure you have good lighting and that your focus is good and know how to focus, you can create really interesting photos. Again, though, be creative. It's okay to break some of these rules, play with them, but be thinking about them and be purposeful what you do, and you'll create even better photos.